What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new episode of the Pro-Black Blurred Kingdom podcast. Alright, so y'all better get ready. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking about a lot of really heavy things, and I'm going to be discussing some things that I really need to get off my chest, some things that I have been wanting to say the entire week, but of course I have to try to put this podcast episode together, so I really hadn't had a chance to just get it all out. But there are a lot of things that I need to talk about, discuss, and vent about, so I appreciate everybody who is listening, because just to let you all know in advance, this is going to get a little rough. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking about the TV show P-Valley and the disrespectful tropes that they have portrayed and anti-black narratives. I'm then going to go into some clarification points that need to be discussed about my views on the LGBT agenda and what I think about all of that. And I'm going to use some specific examples, and hopefully this will help other individuals who have the same views to consider other talking points that may get addressed. And at the very end, I'm going to address some trolls and some dumbasses that felt the need to try to come for me on social media, and addressing some of the things that have been said and the actions that some people have decided to do. So let's go ahead and get started with P-Valley. I made this podcast episode specifically to piggyback off of an Instagram post that I made not too long ago. And I made that Instagram post because I have been watching different television shows, and I just had to put out there how sick and tired I am of the disrespectful and anti-black narratives that get put out on television. So, a few weeks ago, I was watching the show P-Valley. For any of you all who are unaware of what this show was about, I'll give you a brief synopsis. The story of the show is supposed to take place in this fictional city called Chucalissa, Mississippi, and it tells the story of these different strippers who work at a strip club in the Mississippi Delta called the Pink, and it's a Y, not an I. The show apparently is based off of a play called Pussy Valley by Katori Hall, and it centers around a few critical characters such as Autumn Night, who has this mysterious past but becomes a stripper and seems to have a bunch of bread. Mercedes, fine ass. Oof. Man, I can't lie to y'all. That woman is fine as hell, y'all. But yeah, Mercedes is fine ass, who was a stripper at the club too. And then Uncle Cliff, who is the gay man who basically owns the club, at least in the first season. And then there's a few other characters in the show. I'll admit that I actually enjoyed the first season. Sure, I recognize that there were some LGBT storylines thrown in there, but it didn't really bother me all that bad. The only storyline that it had was really Uncle Cliff and his relationship with Lil Murder, who was a gangster rapper in Mississippi trying to make a name for himself, and that was cool. Again, because the storyline was so good, there were no issues with me here. After almost 3 years of being starved from seeing what was bound to happen in the next season of this show, I was disappointed to see the atrocity that was season 2 of this show. A show that I held in such high regard and thought was interesting and had been highly anticipating, all of a sudden quickly got put onto my shit list. See, this is what you have to understand, y'all. The main reason I'm disappointed in the show P-Valley and what it has become is almost beyond this idea that it carries a lot of tropes and narratives disrespectfully to our community. Because I want to be honest with y'all for a second. The one thing I can't stand more than someone who will disrespect you in your face and tell you exactly what you are going to get and not even bat an eye is someone or something that will deceive you by making you think you are going to get one thing and instead you receive something totally different. The disrespect in that is major, and it should not be tolerated on any cylinder. P-Valley in season 2 has proven itself to be deceitful because it's a show that treats you like a fish in a sea. The worm is this idea that they are putting out this edgy, in your face show that has a bunch of beautiful black women with big old booties that are stripping. And then the fish are really black men more than anyone else in this situation, because they're the ones who get reeled in. I will be the first person to admit, I heard about this show and I heard that there were going to be a bunch of beautiful sisters shaking their asses and getting to see them for a great amount of time on TV. You know, I'm thinking like, my ass was like, hell yeah, I'm about to watch this shit. So just to kind of re-go over that analogy, the worm in this case is this idea of having a show with a bunch of beautiful big booty women who are stripping. The fish typically are black men. And there's other people who are fish as well too. And then the fishermen are the producers of this show. See, the fish thought they were going to be getting some food with the worm being put in the sea. And instead, they kind of were like, gotcha, bitch. And here I am watching all types of forms of buck breaking and interracial dating tropes and white saviorism and almost every trope that you can even think of. Specifically, my issues with P-Valley lie in episodes 4 and 5 of season 2. You know, I was okay when you had the relationship between Uncle Cliff and Lil Murder, as I said before, but then the creator said, let me just go ahead and flood this damn show with nothing but LGBT characters. As soon as this season started, you had Uncle Cliff getting it in with another gay dude who appeared at that same club that looked like and acted like Lil Murder, and you had Lil Murder getting it in with Big Teak. And real quick, I just wanted to say what disturbed me about this was the fact that they turned what could have been a solid friendship with two brothers who had each other's back in prison into a thing of buck breaking, and they planted seeds for this buck breaking by making Murder gay in the first place. Teak may have seemed crazy because of his constant outbursts, but really he was right as shit when he went off on Rome's cooning ass when they had a fight about the black man who got killed, and Rome had some disrespectful shit to say, and then get his little stripper Karen flat ass. She also was an issue too. And so they had him talking pro-black when he gave that speech to Murder about how you can't be any type of nigga in this world. And they had Murder up in there talking about some, all right, nigga, calm down. Now let me come fuck you in the ass real quick. That shit was weird. What y'all don't realize is this was made to present the image of a masculine black man who stands up for pro-black values, but to then make him seem like he was crazy, and then to have another masculine black man come in and say, yeah, nigga, come on and take this dick now that you talked all that shit. Anyway, you also have this health inspector. So this is going, now I'm going back to the examples of some of the characters that are LGBT that get thrown in there. You have this health inspector lady who was also LGBT because she came in trying to get her dance on by that stripper who was coughing and sneezing and shit. And then finally, you also had Mercedes, who was turned LGBT as well in this season. And that was literally done for no reason. At the end of the day, I look at that and I say, like, why are there so many LGBT characters that are just surrounded by this strip club? Like, it just didn't make sense. Something about that seemed off. And that's not to say that people who are LGBT shouldn't have the right to be able to be shown on TV and whatnot, in the black community, that is. But my issue is it just didn't seem realistic. I'm like, wow, there's this many people who are LGBT in a show that is centered around this type of concept. Something about that just didn't seem right. You got two gay rappers who end up just showing up, and Uncle Cliff is like dealing with Lil Murder and the dude who looked like him. I don't know, it just didn't seem like that. Just from a numerical ideal and a percentage ideal, the probability that would happen, I don't know, it just seems very low. Let's be clear, family. This was not done on some trying to get black LGBT characters some love like they deserve type of shit, though. This was a sheer act of buck breaking and oversaturating a show that in description was meant to be about some strippers and ended up being about LGBT. And at the end of the day, it was an LGBT show in blackface. Having Uncle Cliff and Murder on the show was a way of showing some representation of that community for sure, but having one guy shove his penis in the other guy's butt with some lube for everyone to see was a little much. I'm not gonna lie, to me that was a little much. But I want to get off that for a minute and talk about all of the other problems I saw as well too. While there is an overrepresentation of LGBTism in this show, there were other random tropes and dysfunctions attached to the other characters who were straight. So, for example, there is a heap of interracial dating tropes pushed on straight characters, and there is also a lot of toxic dysfunction in the relationships of the straight characters as well, too. I mean, think about it. You got Keyshawn, who is a beautiful dark-skinned sister who is dating an abusive white boy, and then you have Roulette, another dark-skinned black woman who is getting hit on by a white boy, and Duffy, who used to date Gidget. And the show is trying to make it where they are getting close because she is telling him all about her brother and all this other stuff. Then you got toxicity with Andre's relationship, and he's a straight black man, by the way. This shit has continued from season 1, and here he is still having these random moments with Autumn Night, and then his wife is cheating on him as well too. Then you got Diamond, who is having a fling with an overly dominant black chick who is trying to, again, dominate him, therefore making him look and appear less masculine. You know, the other thing is, I don't like the negative images and depictions they have placed on straight black men as well too in this show. They have been shown to be rapists, scammers, sleazeballs, drug dealers, oppressors, colorists, weak-willed, mentally unstable, and so much more. They had Rome attempt to rape Keyshawn as a prime example of this, by the way. And they also, in episode 5, did something I found to be disrespectful. They made it where a brother walked up to Keyshawn and dogged her for being dark-skinned and made it seem like black men are oppressing black women on some colorism type shit commonly. And then to make it all worse, who was she saved by? She was saved by Derek, the white boy who she would later go on to having a relationship and kids with, who ends up being her abuser. So now, check this out. You got this white boy beating up on black men who they are clearly trying to paint as oppressors that need to be put in line by this white gentleman. And then they give her, by the way, this poorly acted and poorly scripted Cinderella story where he comes and saves her from her quote-unquote wicked stepmother. They had him come and pick her up from prom, although she thought she wasn't going. They made him all fresh, and it was this big old white savior trip on steroids. I was like, these niggas really thought this shit was cool to televise on TV. They made this dude seem like the good white boy gone bad or some shit. Even the black women in this show are depicted very poorly. You got Mercedes' mama who stole her money, she owed her and never gave it back to her. You got the woman who was taking care of Terica, Mercedes' daughter, who is on drugs. And then you got Autumn, who they are trying to depict as this scandalous business behemoth who is trying to sell out her strip club family. Also, they got Keyshawn looking dumb as hell with no backbone and no will. Not because of the Derek and Diamond situation, but mostly because even when Gidget was being a Karen to Teak, she didn't call her out. She just went and said well, you know, you can't tell everybody everything. She acted like Gidget being on some low-key racist Karen shit was some low-level infraction, like you just told somebody you broke up with your man and they told you it was your fault for staying too long. That may be a situation where you may say, this motherfucker ain't got no empathy, so maybe I won't vent to them again, but this was some real racist shit. Her disregarding the death of a black man like it's unimportant, almost to the point of defending Rome's coonery, was some Karen shit. Let's not even forget, Keyshawn's mom and stepmom both wasn't about shit either. And I just want to add, even with all the bullshit they depicted in this show, they still managed to not even tell a good story. I mean, the subplots are literally all over the damn place. And Keyshawn's acting in that janky ass Cinderella story was worse than watching Batman vs. Superman 3 times in a row with no goddamn break. That's the worst that I've ever seen from P-Valley. How the hell you gonna put out here that you're telling a bunch of stories with all these damn tropes and then still fuck around and tell the story terrible. Like, how do you do that? Are y'all gonna give Autumn Night a more of a backstory and detail into the season about the stuff that she's gone through in the past, or are you just gonna keep making her pop up and make these fucked up business deals? How long do you plan to make Autumn beef with Mercedes? How did y'all make Mercedes such an amateur, mixing business and pleasure, breaking one of Uncle Cliff's rules? Like, I've never seen a show trope span so much they actually fucked up their writing outside of it. Messages are supposed to be subliminally spotty in shows, not the whole reason why you make them. P-Valley, what the fuck was that? Now, y'all, I want to move into some clarification for statements that I've made for the LGBT agenda and my beliefs in some things that I think a lot of people aren't very clear on. And there's a lot of stuff I kind of want to get off my chest because some of y'all done went and pissed me off over your purposeful misunderstanding of my words. Now, I'm going to start off a little bit light and kind of address some of the disagreements that were a little bit more like lighthearted and weren't, in my opinion, ill-intended. And, you know, at least kind of talk through some of those things. But I made a post not long ago about the very real LGBT agenda. I was compassionate, as one of my followers said, by the way. But I'm getting sick and tired of hearing you all whine and bitch about this topic over and over again. I said what I said, and the only thing I'm sorry about is that some of you all aren't really intelligent enough to grasp the issue, and you willingly choose to be stuck in being off code. I know one thing, though. If y'all spent as much time and energy going on and on about the misrepresentation of my view about the LGBT agenda as you did speaking about white supremacy and racism, we as black folks probably would have reparations at this point. But that's cool. I told you all I'm not in the business of changing minds and changing hearts. I'm just hoping to inspire the like-minded through my messages. But for the last damn time, and I promise you, I won't be clarifying this shit at all again, so I want to make this painfully clear. If you ask me what I think for the sakes of the argument of this topic, I will either refer you here or tell you to go to hell. It's that simple. Now, I won't speak for others. I will only speak for myself. I have no problems with the presence of black characters who are LGBT. I have said regularly that they are our brothers and sisters just as much as anyone else is who is in the black community. My issue is the way black LGBT characters are being overly projected by white supremacist media for their own agenda. This was even admitted to by the executives at Disney, a company whose history has been rooted in anti-black racism that you all think for some reason cares about inclusive promotion all of a sudden. If you show an abundance of black LGBT characters and hardly ever show any healthy straight relationships, over time you will socialize children to be LGBT. Over time, when you are fed something over and over again, it will be bred and ingrained in your brain to see some things one way and other things in a different way. It's the same reason why black women used to straighten their hair and now wear weave. Yes, for some, extensions are worn for the purpose of artistic expression, but back in the day, natural wasn't the wave at all. Your hair was seen as nappy. And then if you continue to see images of these beautiful white princesses on television having hair that looks like that becomes a standard of beauty. We are just now reversing that and doing something about that. And that's why you see more of that natural hair wave. Television programming has y'all thinking shit like picnics are an okay thing as well. You'd see cartoons where a character would take a date on a picnic on a beach. And it would look all romantic and all the food would look all good and it seems harmless. But then no one ever explained the history of picnics where whites would sit down and pick a black person to get hung just for entertainment. So by seeing that image all the time and never hearing the historical context of what it meant, you niggas are out here taking your girls on a quote unquote romantic picnic date. Hell, let's be real. The word romantic can even be broken down. It's the idea of loving, doing something in a way that is passionately affectionate and smooth, and really nothing about the Roman culture was smooth, affectionate, or loving, especially their concept of love. And here we are using the term regularly, but that's neither here nor there, I guess. Television programming is simply another way of being sneaky with indoctrination. Why the hell do you think people still play the eeny, meeny, miny, mo game without knowing the origin of the song, which goes eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a nigger by his toe, if he hollers, let him go. And people still do that to just make basic decisions on shit like that's not where the song originated from. That's because they have been indoctrinated, and it has been allowed to go on all the time and to be said all the time as well too. So it's obvious if you look on television that it is being abnormally promoted. When I say it, I'm talking about the LGBT agenda. And it's not for this so-called representation and for having a voice. You got to think about how you are being manipulated. Do you think a bunch of white supremacists sat around and said, throw everything at these niggas in the name of anti-blackness, put them in interracial relationships in abundance, make them nerds, make them sidekicks, make them weak-willed, make them angry, make the women look unappealing and masculine? But no, the gay thing, that's all off limits. You can't be putting that out there. We will promote those black gays out of respect. Family, if you believe that this is how they are thinking, then you're a damn fool. And you know you're a damn fool. So, recently, a friend of mine disagreed with this post, and I want to take some time to address some of his talking points. And you know, friends aren't always going to agree on shit, and that's okay. This friend of mine who disagrees is a very intellectually competent brother, so no disrespect on him whatsoever, especially with me disagreeing with a lot of his points. At the end of the day, I still got love and respect for him, and this is all a learning experience, but I wanted to use his talking points as a way that those of you who understand where I'm coming from can think about when people disagree with you on the subject, you know, of course, if you care, how to respond. At the time, he offered to speak with me about it, and I haven't heard from him, but I'll just refer him to this video if he ever asks me about it, since it assists in me making my point for today. After this episode, though, I really don't feel like rehashing this shit constantly if I don't have to at this point. I already did the video with Eli. Shout out to Mind of Ivory podcast, by the way, once again. And I did the post so you know where I also stand on the LGBT agenda issue. One thing about me, I don't care if you are a friend, an enemy, or whatever. I stand by my well-meant actions and words even if you don't like it. That's called integrity, which is why I know that's probably very foreign to many of you at this point. So, my friend and I, we had a minor dialogue, and he told me in so many words he disagreed because he thinks that the issue of tackling white supremacy is an intersectionalist task that requires all bodies to participate. He told me that what we are seeing is the beginning of the emergence of more representation for our brothers and sisters. He also told me he thinks a great deal of brothers and sisters worked hard to get represented on something like Lightyear, where they had an LGBT black character. It was a woman. She was represented as an LGBT character on there, which is a point that I had mentioned on my post, that she was a part of that. He also talked about the successes of one community bolstering the successes of another, and how it's all about representation. So what I would say to this is, I agree that it needs the input of all blacks, but that's called being on code. You can be LGBT and be on code, and you can be straight and be on code. So it ain't about that. But I think he is just hoping that off and on code people will be unified, and that's not possible. The problem is some folks in the black LGBT community don't care about addressing white supremacy or what white supremacy is doing. They just care that someone showed them on television and gave them some representation, no matter where it came from or what the motive was behind it. And a lot of times they'll start tossing around a bunch of big words and overly decorated phrases that make it seem like they understand what white supremacy is, when they are saying these things or bringing a lot of defensiveness, and really they're just saying whatever. And for all of you liberal morons out there, I just want to throw out this analogy, and hopefully this is a good example to emphasize my point. If I told you that Trump was a bigger racist than Biden, then most of you all would probably want to shoot me. But let me raise you with this argument. What if I said, at least Trump has done something for black folks in a way, and Biden has done nothing? Mind you, I want to make this clear. I'm far from a Trump supporter, because I do believe he and Biden both are anti-black racists. But what if I said, well, Trump at least got Kodak Black out of prison, and Lil Wayne out of prison, and A$AP Rocky out of his little issue with Sweden? At the end of the day, man, straight black men don't deserve the time they are getting in prison. So after all, this is a good thing, and we should support these types of actions. Most of you empty brain morons would probably then go on to say, well, no, you can't look at it like that, because it's a chess move, man. It's a chess move. He doesn't care about all of us. He doesn't. And you know what I would say to that? I totally agree. And I would also say that the idea of how this LGBT agenda works in the exact same way. Do you not believe that promoting gays is a chess move? Or are you someone that would big up someone like Trump because all that matters is that he got black folks out of prison? Never mind it being for his own agenda. And that's why I say, the issue here is that that's how a lot of people are seeing it. They're saying, oh, there's a big promotion of black LGBT people where they weren't being able to be represented before. But my thing is, like, for what motive? Because the person who controls media are white people. So do you really think that white people are doing it for their own gain? So I use the Trump example to say, well, Trump got black people out of prison, and you're saying that he's a racist, and he's a bigger racist than somebody like Biden. That's why I use the liberal example. And then most people I said would say, well, that was a chess move. That was a chess move, you know, that he doesn't really care. So I'm just simply throwing that same thing out there. But anyway, I disagreed mostly on the premise that it was deeper than what I think this brother was saying. And this comment assumes whoever is leading media, which is white people, are looking to represent black folks who are LGBT more, which is simply not true. I also don't think digging into intersectionality has much to do with what he said either. It doesn't have much to do with the idea of addressing white supremacy. It's all about whether or not that unified body is on code or not. The specifics of what one identifies with as straight, trans, gay, whatever, don't really have any importance if your mind is in the right place and you have that same mission as your other brothers and sisters to fight white supremacy. So at some point, this was this brother's response when I said what I said here. Thanks for the response. What's funny is my understanding of intersectionality is precisely what you described. It wasn't something that includes the entire black community as a whole. It's just recognizing the many ways oppression and privilege manifest throughout the community. It's far easier to reach a unity of body and thought when empathetic attention is paid to every limb. I don't think the nuance you introduced about oversaturation of black LGBT characters to upend healthy heterosexual relationships holds much water too. My question would be, what constitutes an oversaturation? Has the presence of these characters been shown to have damaging effects on heterosexual relationships? And if so, what is the right amount of LGBT characters that would work? I think if the issue is more so about performative inclusion by companies or pandering, then that's a different discussion. The tropes and stereotypes employed by a white supremacist structure are indeed many, but I don't necessarily think the presence of black LGBT characters is one. So, this is what I would say as a response. To be honest, analyzing intersectionality really isn't important to addressing white supremacy outside of understanding the historical context of factors such as buck breaking and other concepts that may have led to some of these intersectional issues. which were done by the white LGBT community, by the way, which I believe most people in the black LGBT community don't even want to touch on as far as white supremacy goes. I know most people would rather criticize me and try to browbeat me for speaking an unpopular perspective as a black man than to address the manipulation of the white LGBT community and other forms of white supremacy. And really, I think that a lot of you all, by the way, this is a side comment real quick. I think that a lot of people should look at the historical context of buck breaking because it explains a lot of why this type of thing was done. And I'll get into some of that before, but there were a lot of methods and things that were done by white supremacists who, if you're doing this to people who are the same sex as you, you're LGBT. I don't care about this whole idea of pedophilia and rapists, like it's different than being LGBT. No, that still makes you LGBT because you're doing it to somebody who's of the same sex. So, and I think that was a way of breaking the spirits of these black slaves. But again, we'll get into that at some point. I just wanted to make that point there. This is what I also said to him. What you said about it being easier to reach each body and limb of the intersection doesn't make any sense either. The first problem with that is I think we got lost in translation on what is supposed to be reaching the entire body. And I'll be straight with you. If you are listening, what you're saying is getting a little close to word salad territory. The way I see it, though, is what needs to reach people in our community, regardless of gender, sexuality, etc., is, do they have an understanding of white supremacy uniformly? Is there a uniform understanding of what needs to be done in order to tackle white supremacy? And are you willing to speak truth to power and act upon it? This is why your statement and approaching it with empathy on all parts doesn't make sense. White supremacists over promoting black LGBT in media is not a flex to celebrate when the likes of white supremacy is the one who made that possible, especially when it has not been represented from an opposing standpoint, heterosexual blacks. Also, black LGBT appearing more and black straights, quote unquote, emotionally understanding the need for their overexerted presence does not mean white supremacy is being diminished. One cannot simply diminish white supremacy by appearing more underneath their thumb. And that's considering the idea that they are still underneath white supremacy from a physical, mental, and social standpoint. My second point when it comes to empathy is, why should whether or not you are receiving empathy one way or another be a motivating force to tackle white supremacy? What about dismantling it because it's just the right damn thing to do and helps the entire community? Black men who are heterosexual don't receive any empathy individually and never also seem to receive empathy collectively for what happens to them. But that doesn't stop us from speaking truth to power. There are literally other black men saying black men are the white men of black people, which is bullshit and disrespectful. And black women calling some, I'm not saying all sisters do this because that wouldn't be true, calling us bullet bags when we get killed by the police like it's a joke. And here a lot of us are still trying to dismantle the system of white supremacy for the entire black community, even those who hate us in our own camp. That, my boy, is a silly excuse used to cover up a different motive. So if we're going to talk about this empathy on all parts, why don't black LGBT members that are off code ask why negative tropes get attached to straight blacks so frequently in white media? It's because they have contempt for the straight black community and are more concerned about themselves. To me, empathy, as you said, should cover all parts, correct? My answer is because identify more with being LGBT and see straight blacks as oppressive. So to them, dealing with issues of blackness comes second. So my question to you here would be, if black LGBT members are given empathy and saluted, what would they then do to combat white supremacy? From my perspective, they would be concerned about themselves because they got exactly what they needed, which is to be seen and to be heard. Now, with my example not holding much water, I would say it doesn't hold water to you because you don't want it to hold water, not because it actually doesn't. As far as oversaturation, I think that that's kind of a broad question that can easily be twisted and turned to validate certain reasonings. Without obviously being a smartass, the general definition of oversaturation is putting or portraying something out in an excessive amount. And in white media, I'm sure you can surmise what that means, that and what that would look like for the black LGBT people in media. And yes, white supremacy will have, and has had an adverse effect on all black relationships, as a matter of fact. The first question I would ask in response to that is, who are the most impressionable persons when it comes to information, learning new things in media? To me, the answer is children. Who watches television the most? To me, the answer is also children. Because children see these images the most on television. They see images of black LGBT characters, and these shows go over and beyond to portray how powerful it is to be LGBT. They use light and all these other things, which, by the way, brother, if you listen, you're in media, so you already know this to present such things as powerful. And I don't have a problem with that per se. But what I'm saying is, what they then do is rarely show black heterosexual relationships, or if they do, they make them toxic or add some other strange thing in there that is adverse to what would create that healthy dynamic that's needed. So now all they see is black LGBT characters, and eventually children are socialized into being gay. What this turns into is subtle genocide. The heterosexual black dynamic looks unattractive. Being LGBT looks attractive. And now more children will want to be gay. Messages have a powerful way of influencing our thoughts and culture. Then that means less babies are produced. And I know you can adopt and all this other stuff, but after a while, how are you going to keep adopting black babies if less are being produced? It's a sneaky way for white supremacists to mitigate the population, and it's what white supremacists want. Now, don't get me wrong, LGBT has always existed and will always exist, and that's okay. I support that as long as it makes them happy. But there has never been a time when those who are LGBT exceeded or equated those who are straight. Now, obviously, that doesn't include those afraid to say it who are in the black community, but even those who stayed silent, added on, most likely won't make that possible, because I think they only make up 3% of the population, but I could be wrong about that number. The point is that it's so minute, even those that don't speak up about it wouldn't maximize it to a number that would make them equate the number of straight people who exist in the black community. I'm speaking from a natural standpoint. The question you asked me, though, is pretty broad about what is a sufficient number as well, too. All your questions are kind of broad, but what you are asking me to do is round up every black show that ever existed and how much each show had, and I'm not going to do that. So we can say, so then you can then say this number versus that number works, but this is what I will say for you. I'm not sure if you watch television much, but let's take this from a black comic show perspective. There are 6 black comic live action shows, or those with a black lead, that have existed, I believe. And out of all of those shows, not one had a healthy relationship where a black man and black woman were together without toxicity or some other issue. You have Cloak and Dagger, who basically put tie with Tandy. You have Luke Cage, who couldn't keep a woman to save his life, period. And he dipped in Jessica. I get it. It was in the comics. I get it. Everybody gonna make that argument, but I'm just making my point here. You have Nicole and Raising Dion, whose husband was MIA, although he was a black man. You have Alex and Runaways, who broke up with Libby, who was a black woman, and then he was treated like an outcast by his whole damn team. You have Jefferson and Lynn, who were walking toxicity. You have Ryan Wilder, who was LGBT. And you have Naomi from the show Naomi, who was LGBT. But if you look, there was a track record of black LGBT characters like Ryan and her relationship with Sophie, who were both black and LGBT. You had Comanche and Shades, and Comanche is a black LGBT character at this point. You had Anissa and Grace. Anissa is black, and even in non-white shows, you had people like Curtis, who was supposed to be Mr. Terrific in Arrow, and he was happily married, LGBT, and his partner actually was in the white LGBT community. You had Fastos, who was married, and he was LGBT. You had Naomi, again, who was the lead person who was LGBT, and they didn't even want to put her with the brother in the show, so she could just chase that other side, that LGBT side of herself. You had Nicole's sister in Raising Dion, who was LGBT. I mean, bro, come on, let's not act like this isn't a thing. I really don't want to play that game. I think if we were being realistic to what we typically see, it would look like there was an overall ratio displacement. That's the point that I'm trying to make. But let's flip this though. If you saw only a handful of gay couples and an overabundance of straight black couples, would you complain that there is not enough gay couples and an overabundance of many straight couples? And then I would say to you, what if I flipped the argument on you and said having a lot of straight couples is good because eventually this could help the gay part of the community? Do you think that that would fly today? If so, then I'm not sure what we're really debating. You also made a statement about how black gays work hard to be in roles like Buzz Lightyear. Do you think that black straight people don't work hard to be properly represented in media? And that's a rhetorical question. But a serious question would be, aren't they doing the same thing in media? If no, are you saying gays have more work ethic than straights? I don't think you are. But let's say that you're saying yes. Then we need to further pry at why black LGBT representation gets greenlit and why straight black empowerment, especially if masculine, doesn't get greenlit. And I can honestly tell you why. Because they won't let the image of a powerful black dynamic with a masculine black man and feminine black woman fly. Proof of that was in the show American Gods when they got rid of Orlando Jones for trying to turn Anansi, the god of trickery, into a pro-black god. And they told him he was sending the quote-unquote wrong message to his community. What does that mean? The issue is white supremacy knows that if we show ourselves as powerful beings who know who our enemy is, then we'd take over from their perspective. If not, we'd be bickering among each other like we are right now. Now, my question here is, do you not believe in socialization? If no, consider this. Television programming is called programming for a reason. You program an individual to believe the messages you put out, and after hearing it in repetition, they absorb it. You become what you continuously engross yourself in and believe to be okay. If you think white supremacists were sneaky enough to put racist messages in movies and shows, and we went all this time saying and doing shit they portray, and just now getting to the point where we call it out, what is stopping them from doing that with LGBT? They are the ones with control of these media systems, especially as a group. So this is their doing. My point is, I would agree with you that quote unquote things are better if we saw more respect given to every black, literally every black. But the other evidence plus this shows that this is not the case. LGBT being promoted is fine, but promoting it without addressing all parts properly is not fine, which is why I said we need our own shit so we can be properly promoted. More about ownership, less about representation. The problem with a lot of off-code blacks in the LGBT community, though, and many in the straight, I'm gonna get some strays on the straight community as well too, especially those who are liberal, are that they don't really want to fight white supremacy and dismantle that system. They want to find their personal comfort in it where they aren't attacked and affected personally without regard to how it negatively impacts others. Progress to them is made when they are allowed seats at the table, when white folks can hear them, and when they can change their hearts to make proper accommodations for them in a world that they conquered and stole from us. The fact that we spend so much time on the intersectional part and not enough on white supremacy is the exact problem that I've been pointing out. The final question I would add is, what do you believe white supremacy means? To me, I think this tends to be one of the biggest disconnects when understanding how to be on code, because the alternative to not understanding this is the purposeful intent to be off code. Also, I need to make it clear, I really don't give a damn about inclusion. We don't need to be included. I'm all about black ownership and creating our own products. I only point out issues in white comic media, and people choose to either agree or continue to defend the progress of white media. Now, you can disagree or whatever with all this, man. I'm not concerned about that, but I want to make sure that the message and what I've said is very clear. It's all about constructivity, and it's all love this way. But I just thought that it would be important for me to lay out not only just an answer to your question, but a deep understanding of the way that I'm thinking about this entire situation. So now that we got that out the way, let's talk about some dumbasses. Speaking of someone saying it's all love, I want to talk about some trolls and morons that came on this post, that came on this same post I'm talking about and was doing the most. And I want to address them. Hopefully in the process, you can learn something from this conversation too. So I had two very goofy individuals try to come for me in their own ways on this post specifically, and I'm going to take some time to get both of their goofy asses together on this episode. For sakes of not giving either of these two any type of shine, I'm going to give them some nicknames. The first one, we're going to call this fool Fairy Thug. And the second person, we're going to call her Horny and Corny. So we're going to talk about who these people are for a second. So with Fairy Thug, you're probably wondering why I called this fool this name. I called him Fairy Thug because he was acting like a soft-boiled bitch, but still trying to throw some street sauce in at the same time, or whatever the hell he was trying to do during our conversation. So he gets on this post and basically in so many words believes that I am conflating the issue of white pandering with the LGBT agenda. He tried to infer that I was taking the issue of white pandering, that I was taking the issue of white pandering out on people and black people in the LGBT community. Then he proceeded to make the argument that white supremacy is lazy. He was like, them white supremacists don't be trying to include them LGBT people. Don't you know they just be all lazy and shit with the inclusion? They be just mashing all that shit together like mashed potatoes. You be right though about them showing them gays though, more them scrapes. They be appearing on TV and shit, but we can't be talking about shit like them gay folks though. And I'm like, I don't know how many times I have to say this, but the two issues were conflated because they are mutually exclusive. White supremacy has never been lazy. Never. White supremacists know exactly what they are doing and how to put things out in a calculated way. It is the most intellectually complex system in the world, truth be told. And I promise you, I am not bigging up this system by any means, but I just want to be very clear. This system is what has kept us disenfranchised and enslaved for 400 plus years. And if you ever listen to Neely Fuller Jr., he breaks down how this is all possible. He talks about how confusion is their main go-to, and they will literally use anything to confuse you into believing it is not going on. That is why I can't wrap my mind around why Negroes like this goofy ass Negro think LGBT is off limits in the minds of white supremacists. Neely Fuller Jr. even talks about the goal in white supremacy, one of the goals being racial sexual confusion, and how that is a trick used by white supremacists to confuse those who may identify with that community, and how this can spiral into confusion in other ways as well too. Another example of confusion for those who don't quite understand this is if a white person kills a group of black people, it will then be called a hate crime. But then that same white person, that white supremacist, may turn around and kill one of his own. So now, and it just looks like he's crazy. It doesn't look like a hate crime. He looks like a homicidal maniac. And race isn't even a factor at this point. Think about how like school shootings and things like that happen. They say those people are mentally ill and all this other stuff. A lot of them people be white supremacists low key. You kill 100 blacks and you kill 5 whites and all of a sudden race is just debunked in the problem. No, that's the whole point of it. So basically, I explained this to this man that it's an intellectually sound system, and I explained how black children are being socialized into this agenda instead of allowing it to naturally occur if that's what's meant to happen. This nigga turns around and then said, intellectually sound? That shit is wild, bruh. I ain't never heard no nigga say no shit like that. I ain't no way be socializing them niggas to be gay. That don't be possible and shit. Black identity don't be determined by white media, man. If you ain't know, cause trust me, I be knowing because I be seeing this. They sure enough be existing. So whether or not they are on screen, it should not be no issue. But behind the scenes, you right though. You right. About there be some type of trope and shit that's pushed. White folks don't be caring about niggas and shit, and being gay be making the niggas digest oh damn, I don't know how to say that shit, but white people feel better about seeing them and that type of shit than they do to straight people. This man was laughing like this shit was funny. But I understand there is quite a bit of joy in embracing coonery to the common coon. That's why they laugh at matters they don't fully understand. It's like, nah, I'm a brother who understands the way white supremacy can show up, and I'm not afraid to call it out, unlike yourself, sir. Don't project onto me like I'm being disrespectful to LGBT folks when I'm trying to call out how they're being used and abused even as a part of our community. And no one said white people determine our identity, but they spend billions of dollars into promoting and showcasing LGBT characters in general, and somehow the blacks in our community get made the faces of that. I know a lot of that is because they are trying to support the white LGBT community, which, by the way, is loaded with white supremacists, and they include black gays in that for their own gain, much like white women try to include black women in the feminist movement. I don't know, man. Then Fairy Thug got to splaining and started agreeing and disagreeing at the same time with literally the same damn points that I originally made. Homeboy was experiencing his own damn confusion as far as I'm concerned. He didn't even know what the fuck he was saying anymore or believed anymore after a while, so he had to sit up here and start throwing up shit that wasn't even part of the damn conversation. You be right about them more comfortable seeing gay folk. They be black. That be black. Than straight folk. That be niggas, man. Ha 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 ha. But at the end of the day, gay people be existing, so we got to be cool with seeing them on screen. I'm like, what? So you basically agree with what I'm saying, but you want to throw in the suggestive lie that I'm trying to somehow attack LGBT folks for being on screen? My whole point was that gay blacks are being used for a white supremacist agenda. I would also add that white media wanting to see more effeminate and gay blacks than straight blacks because it's digestible to see less blacks who are powerful is white supremacy in itself. And it's a point you actually agreed with me on, you damn dimwit. If there is an image presented that can be regularly shown where we look weak, then that is how our people see us. But more important, that is how our kids as they grow will see themselves. This was the plan from the beginning. If they were willing to buck break you in slave times and not make amends for it, what the hell do you think will stop them from doing so on your television screens? That is why they always try to get even the straight black male actors to put on dresses and mimic sisters. As I said before, television programming is called programming for a reason. You can absolutely be socialized into something if you tell someone something in repetition enough times. That is why I use the picnic example. You are or become what you consume and what you emboss yourself in. So if you constantly watch content showing you how to bring black LGBT into a norm when it's actually a minority, you actually will believe that as well too. And I tried to explain that to Fairy Thug because it's clear that reading and comprehension ain't really his strong suit. And that's a damn shame because he seems to have a book club, and that sounds kind of janky, I ain't gonna lie. Then this man started rambling about how I can have a problem with no representation of straight black families while supporting and seeing blacks on screen too. And he said that that specific division is white supremacy. And he highlighted that for some reason and then started babbling about there being a lot of straight black promotion in the 90s. So first of all, I don't know how many times I have to say my problem is the mission of white supremacy. The issue here is who is the puppeteer? And it ain't black folks, no matter what your sexual orientation is. You keep talking, he keeps talking like we are in a perfect world where both these things are existing in the way that they should, and we are the ones in control of that narrative, and that's simply not true. And who gives a shit about what was going on 20 or 30 years ago? Promoting healthy black family dynamics isn't a trend that should just be pushed for a limited time. It should be continuous, matter of fact, permanent. And there wasn't this big plentiful amount of black television shows that had great black family dynamics of straight blacks. There were just a select few popular ones that people could handpick. So He had a moment where he started blowing his little fairy dust around because I encouraged him to study up on white supremacy and told him he was making it seem like a lot of what was happening was a coincidence, and he kind of got puffed up in the chest. And he was saying I was throwing certain words on him, like when I told him that this is not a coincidence, he said I didn't say that was a coincidence and whatnot. Then started talking about he was an educator, so he already knows what that means. And I'm like, shit, I'm afraid of that. You call yourself an educator and you laughing at white supremacy being an intellectual system? Anyway, this fool got to babbling and he went from saying it was good to talk to another brother on some real phony energy type shit, and then later saying some hater ass shit. I told him that he should check out one of my podcast episodes because I actually break down how it can show up. And I ended up deleting his comment because he made a comment after that because he was tripping. He basically said, I watch it for entertainment, although I know it's gonna be dumb, but it's all love though. It's all love, nigga. See, that's where you went and fucked up, Fairy Thug. Don't you dare get your goofy ass on my platform and call what I'm saying dumb because you halfway understand how the shit works, and then you want to waste time babbling like a bitch. That's the one thing I can't stand, y'all. A man who purposely misses the facts, or in his case, acknowledges the facts, but then wants to turn around and try to be right. He started getting into semantics and shit. Oh, you said intellectually sound, not intellectual system. That's wild for a black man to be saying and shit. Seriously though, y'all, that's some real hater energy. You went from saying it was good to talk to another brother to getting frustrated and telling me what I was saying was dumb because you got challenged for not being able to explain your original gripe. And then you go and watch my podcast for pure entertainment and say that what I'm saying is dumb. I hope you listen to this episode because then you can see that what I'm making right now, this shit is for the entertainment of babbling ass Negroes like yourself. My thing is, if you agreed with my main point that I went and I made, that doesn't, and then you say that it's dumb, everything that I said was dumb, that don't make you too bright. And also, why in the fuck would you listen to something by someone that you don't rock with after you establish that it was dumb? That's what's wild. I'd be damned if I do that. But it be all love. It's all love though, nigga. Give me some love, nigga. Anyway, the thing I didn't like about all this is I didn't curse at this man. I didn't berate him. I didn't talk trash about him. Nothing. But at the end, him tripping like that made me want to roast the hell out of him. Like, how dare you sit on here and call my stuff dumb on some goofy shit? That's where I drew the line. I was like, nah, man, you're gonna get roasted in this session real quick. Now let's move on to Horny and Corny because I want to talk about her too. So this young woman is someone who I am roasting for multiple reasons. At least with Fairy Thug, he was using complete sentences and speaking above a 4th grade comprehension level. And I'll admit that during my conversation with Fairy Thug, my phone was autocorrecting my grammar in weird ways, so my messages did come out kind of janky. So I'll admit that I took that L. But with this woman, it's like she just started mashing words together. She just started saying random shit. Cactus, unicorn, glass, horseshoe, lantern, grape, frog, sewing machine, brain. It's almost like she was speaking another damn language. I call that shit ashy-ish because I don't know what the hell she was saying. This woman annoyed me from the gate because she started off the conversation with corny trolling. She asked me from the jump if I have a black agenda or if I think gays are taking over the world. My thing is, if you're going to troll and be an ashy moron, at least let your trolling be funny. Like, literally, that's the corniest shit I think I've done ever heard. Black agenda? When it comes to media, what the fuck is a damn black agenda? If a black agenda existed, you cornball ass woman, then we black people as a whole would be represented properly without a trope, without anti-blackness, and without having to wonder if they are being played for a fool. Like if we're being played for a fool. Black folks would be owning their own studios and hiring their own producers to make their own stories without being worried about the way that we may be canceled by white society for not buying into their own agendas. If a black agenda existed, you corny woman, then you would be spending time trying to figure out how to collaborate with blacks to put your money together to take over media as a collective instead of trolling in the comments because you have nothing better to do with your ashy life in the name of saving face for a white supremacist agenda. She then started spouting off some random things about democracy and voting and all this other BS that wasn't even in the context of the pillar of media and how it relates to white supremacy. Then she ends off saying that it's not wrong to have an agenda, but downing someone else's agenda to make a point isn't helpful. When I read that, my first instinct was to say, what? We are literally like speaking two different damn languages right now. I'm not even going to try to rack my brain to unpack that because she barely wanted to even use hers. Then she admitted to trolling and tried to say she's willing to have a real convo with me. Just in those few moments, I saw how chaotic her energy was. How chaotic of you to go from trolling to blending random words together to then quickly trying to be serious. Like, wow, just wow. After this, I proceeded to try and re-explain somehow what she missed because at this point, it felt like there were a lot of issues and there was a lack of understanding. There was too much going on. And I tried to be cool and kind of joke around and say, just to let you know, sister, I just want to let you know, that was kind of corny. That was pretty corny because she knew it was. But that was my mistake. She was really a lost cause and I hadn't figured it out at that point. Before I go on, I want to pause here for a second and address something. By now, you all are probably wondering at this point by now why I called her horny and corny. I'm addressing the corny part to a certain extent, but I'll eventually get to the horny part. I just want to let y'all know that. So eventually she tried to throw out there that I'm calling her corny, but I'm the one who slid into her DMs trying to connect with her and trying to engage with her. First of all, let's get something straight for all you social media junk. I just want to say this real quick. This is off the record. First of all, let's get something straight for all you social media junkies out there. I probably see something I don't like, disagree with, or just totally think is wrong on an hourly basis if you add up all the time I've spent on social media. I find a lot of humanity in general is filled with a bunch of people who feel validated by an echo chamber that supports their opinion rather than facts and project their opinion to try to change minds and hearts. They think it's okay to not try to learn and grow because their own hubris is stronger than their brain power. It's easier to find a condescending quote or likes from other idiots to validate your half-baked opinion. I say all this to say it's hard to be on social media because I don't have these aspirations like a lot of you all do. I don't need people to support me, and I know that most won't have my back for real and my best interests. That's why I say what I mean, and I do it without fear. Of course, I would want people to support me, but I don't need to sit there and try to play nice with people so that they are able to understand or be able to empathize with me because I can't really have that expectation of anyone. I stand on integrity. The moral of the story here is I see so much I disagree with, but you don't see me walking around whining on folks' posts all the time to tell them why what they are saying is folly to me. Not that there's anything wrong with that here and there, but follow me for a second. If you try to present this facade of engagement, then don't be a phony asshole. I post about comics. I post about think pieces for Black empowerment. I have a book. I have a website. I have audio comics. I have entertaining stories. And the one time you choose to engage with me is to be combative on a post about an LGBT agenda. So my issue here is not with people who mix it up and agree with some stuff and disagree with others. My issue are with the phony people out there who only come on social media to be disrespectful or just to disagree so that other lowlifes can then like that. And this cornball chick did exactly that. She's been following me long enough now that if she wanted to mix it up, she could have. But no, you decide to be sassy and show off that 4th grade education and the alien language skills to try to argue about agendas. And she, literally, this was her argument. She said, I'm the one who hopped into hers to connect, and I roast her when she tries to engage. I'm like, girl, you're creating this facade of engagement as if I'm doing something wrong by calling you out for engaging. No, you're being a manipulative asshole. So when this woman sat up there and said I slid into her DMs to connect, I'm like, this chick is acting like I'm trying to get on or some shit. She couldn't wait to try and let the world know that I was in her DMs. She probably one of them chicks who looked like Secret Squirrel growing up and got clowned, and then when she had a glow up, she couldn't wait to embarrass the first dude who ever hit her up and screenshot that shit for the world to see. She probably was like, girl, look at this nigga right here. He think he's slick trying to get at me with that pro-black talk, but I ain't giving up this pussy for him. Matter of fact, I'm gonna out his thirsty ass. I'm put him on blast. This woman got hyped that someone went and showed her black ass some remote form of interest, even with it just being about business. Anyway, my thing is, I hop in everyone's DMs to introduce myself, to connect, to network, and to build. She ain't special, and I told her this. She said I was trying to embarrass her, and I'm like, girl, you embarrass your damn self. I know I'm handsome, and maybe that's a fantasy for you, but I'm good. I have a woman who, unlike you, is pleasant, fly, respectful, and puts on lotion. Anyway, I want to go back to the mistake that I made. We had a conversation in the DMs briefly because I wanted to give her a chance to have a serious dialogue. She explained that I was trying to make her look bad, and I told her, let's get something straight. You got roasted and called corny because you were trolling, and then you admitted to it. Then you turned it around and wanted to make this a whole serious ordeal. That's corny chick behavior. I'm down for dialoguing, and I'm okay with you disagreeing with my stance, but you brought in weird energy with that trolling, and it kind of threw off the vibe for me. She tried to question my motives even as a media analyst and all this other nonsense. And I asked her, I even asked her this question. I asked her, like, are you LGBT yourself? I just want to be able to understand your background, so I make sure I'm being sensitive if that's a thing. She got defensive and started blending that shit in with the trolling to justify it. And she said she trolled because what I said affected her because she has family members and friends who are LGBT, and she thinks everyone has the right to be seen or heard, and why would it matter whether or not she was or was not affected by being LGBT? So in other words, she said that she's not LGBT, but why would it matter? And she said, can she not be intelligent and be able to make her point? Old girl sitting up here trying to have a dialogue with me and all this other stuff and all this other shit, trying to go in on me, and she could barely hold a intellectual conversation without being a total asshole. It's kind of ironic to the idea of being able to be logical in a conversation. It's like, it's one thing to be a part of that community and think I wasn't being sensitive enough to your language, which I would understand, but you are some straight chick off the street and you can barely keep it together off of a purposeful, at this point, misrepresentation of my words, since she established that she understood what I meant at this point. She even started explaining when it came to the trolling, and she claimed I trolled back, and I'm like, how the hell am I going to troll on my own post? No, you ham of a woman. I roasted you for being childish and corny. So eventually I told her, you know, with the family thing, I mean, one of my best friends is gay, which is true. And he actually agrees with me with everything I say. One of my family members, my cousin, she's actually LGBT as well, too. She's real cool, yeah. And she actually agreed with me on the P-Valley thing. And I'm not saying that to dog whistle these people. I'm just making the point that I, too, have gay friends and family that I care about. Matter of fact, my homeboy one day actually brought up to me that he thinks there is a weird agenda out there, and he is a gay black man. It's not like I coerced him into the shit. And I told her that I think about brothers like him, you know, very, very like pro-black brothers like him, because there's a lot of like gay pro-black brothers. I don't know why they're acting like this is not a thing. Like, think about James Baldwin. He was always on code. Anyway, so I told her that I think about brothers like him when I think about some of these things that I talk about, and when I make my post about how black people in the LGBT community get played by white supremacists and media to a certain degree. Then she tried to compare me, saying that I sound like that white man saying that he has a white person or a white man or whoever saying that I have a black friend who does so and so and so and so. And I'm like, if you don't get your mammy ass out of my face with that disrespectful shit, how dare you compare me to a white supremacist like I have power over a group, or like I can actually disenfranchise black LGBT members as a group, or that the struggle of being LGBT in the LGBT community is equivalent to that of a black person. It's not even remotely the same. And also, you threw that out there first. You're the one who said I have close LGBT family members, yada, 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 yada. And I just simply told your goofy ass I do too. Then this girl sent all these big ass paragraphs and tried to talk about oppression Olympics and how there are healthy straight black couples on shows, which my point was that there aren't very many. Not that they were just like gone, that there really aren't many that you can barely point to them, and they seem to always be attached to some ridiculous trope even. But you know what? Whatever. At some point, she starts babbling and talking about dumb blondes and jocks and smart Asians, and then she said Hispanic workers as stereotypes, and it just became kind of bizarre after a while, and I grew tired. I told her at this point she is just babbling and making bad faith arguments for the sakes of arguing. This reminded me, by the way, y'all, of someone I used to talk to in college. There was a young lady who I used to talk to, and we were involved with one another. But she stayed trying to argue with me even when we decided to just be friends. And a lot of people would always tell me, man, she still likes you, blah, 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 blah. And I was on some stupid shit like, nah, we just friends, and you know, like it ain't nothing. Until one day, one of my homegirls pulled me aside and sat me down and said, bro, you need to open your eyes. This girl likes you. I mean, her whole body language changes when she talks about you. Family, it's like the arguing just turned her on. I just couldn't believe that was a thing. So during the conversation, or the babble session, whatever you want to call it, Horny and Corny said I love to see a strong black man defend his points until I realize he hasn't done his homework. It's so entertaining. And I'm like, girl, get your puss together. She the type to probably like to sexually break and peg niggas. But at some point, and this might be why I don't like back and forth now, especially with people who I am dating or in a relationship with. This brought me back to the situation with the girl I told you about. And I said she's one of those chicks who likes to go back and forth with dudes like it's a turn on or some shit, which is how this chick got the name Horny. So now she's horny and corny because of that. I even told her, I think you're getting off on this shit, and I'm going to have to chuck up the deuces because your babbling is boring, and I feel like you're treating this like an aphrodisiac. So she says, how can you expect to win if you can't even meet me at the table to talk? One day you'll learn. And then she sends me a little kissing face emoji, and then she says you just wanted to break me. Listen, y'all, none of what I'm saying is a lie. This shit really happened. And I told her, you know, you had the night you deserve because you're getting a little intense and sultry and passionate. And if I continue any longer, I'm afraid my wife may have to intervene and put her foot up your ass. Anyway, she ended off saying something about me wanting the black community to lose just because I didn't want to keep arguing with her. And I'm like, girl, you got a whole page and content dedicated to self-care, and you disrespected me because I did just that, utilize self-care. My self-care was not continuing to go back and forth with you. She said I have no intention on saving the black community because my self-care was removing myself from your toxicity. So you're correlating me not wanting to save the black community or help the black community or do whatever I can for the black community because I didn't want to argue back and forth with you and be exposed to your toxicity any longer than I already have been. Seems like your self-care is to pillage and plunder Negroes. Anyway, so she got videos too, by the way. She got videos on her page and shit, twerking, looking like she got an OnlyFans account that niggas can buy for $2 per month. It looked like you need to focus on that shit instead of trying to get in the damn ring and win to discuss issues of white supremacy. You need to watch a Meg Thee Stallion video because your ass can't even twerk right. But anyway, after all this frustrating dialogue, y'all, how about 2 posts later, she went and liked one of my posts when I was talking about a completely different topic. I'm like, girl, you just sat here and told me I don't want to help the black community. I don't research, I don't do my homework, and I have a problem with being a know-it-all and I'm too into myself, but then went back and supported my content after this argument. That right there, y'all, is chaotic. I had to realize though with her, you ain't no hater, you a groupie. It's official. Your boy Cool Colas has a groupie, y'all. Wow. Anyway, see, this is what happens, family, when you start to disrespect me. I mind my own damn business. I try to be a good person. I try to be a kind person. But when you fuck with me, I will roast your ass like some Yukon potatoes. Because the way that these people just came at me was totally unacceptable, totally disrespectful, and just not cool. Matter of fact, I probably would have never actually gone this long on the podcast had they not done what they done and said what they said. Do better, y'all. Do so much better. Anyway, y'all, I'm gonna go ahead and get up out of here. I had enough time trying to sit here and talk about these folks and trying to tell y'all about, like, you know, the P-Valley situation and some of the things that I saw and some of the things that showed up. But for those of you all who wanted to kind of see the dialogue that could exist between yourself and somebody who agrees with the LGBT agenda, I hope that this was very helpful. And for those of you who probably think different than me, I hope that this was a new perspective and at least like allowed you to have something to consider, even if you don't necessarily agree with my perspective. Again, like, I respect all perspectives. I really do. I'm just explaining why I disagree, and I'm roasting the people who decided that it was cool to be disrespectful and not cool to me. So I just want to make it clear, this is not in bad faith. This is called straightening right here. We straightening some shit out. We're kind of making sure that we hash out what is the problem, where's the disconnect, making sure everybody knows where I stand on with the LGBT agenda and where I think it's coming from. And this is the last time I'm going to be doing that. Now, if somebody asks me the question, I may like briefly say how I feel, but at the same time, I just want to make it clear, this is the very last time I'm going to do a whole podcast episode to tell y'all, hey, look, here are all the reasons why I disagree with the LGBT agenda. I'm not going to be flushing it out and over explaining again, because that shit's getting ridiculous. I said what I said. I said what I said. I meant what I said, and I'm going to continue to fight against white supremacy, even if you all don't want to join me. Anyway, I hope that this was helpful, and I'm going to go ahead and, you know, take care of some other stuff. I'll be sure to post some new episodes coming up pretty soon, and I will be talking to y'all later. Peace.